Thanks a lot. Great. Yeah. I'm T-Bone. I'm an alcoholic, and it's good being here. I'm going to say that, first of all, my sobriety birthday is the 27th of June, 1984. I came in when I was 22, and I'm no longer 22 now. And so, anyway, I think the best thing to do would be to start off with why I'm here and what brought me here and what it really means to be an alcoholic for me. And there's a thing in the big book, what we were like, what happened and what we're like now. It's basically what I want to talk about because that's kind of what we do here. So anyway, I'll give you a couple of little pictures of what I was like drinking. If we can go back to the early 80s, I'm 20, and and I'm going to use this one specific example. I started drinking that afternoon, like it's like a Wednesday afternoon, I think it was, or Tuesday afternoon, something like that. I worked as a security guard at the time at the mills in town, and as a result, my weekends tend to be like Sunday through, you know, Wednesday or whatever. And so as a result, so that's kind of when I drank. It tends to be when the real serious people drink, is Sundays and stuff like that. So it's like it's almost like, amateur night really is like Fridays and Saturdays, really. But, but this is what I did, so I started in the afternoon, started late in the afternoon and stuff. Uh, at about just before 2, I picked up a bottle of Rianini Lambrusco for a nightcap and went home, drank the whole thing because, that's a bottle of wine is about right for me for a nightcap. And I was doing that, I had my stereo on up to 10, which is as far as the sound would go. My neighbor came down. I got to meet my neighbor. She wasn't in a very good mood. And and so anyway, she went back and I turned off the sound machine, went to bed. I had really bad bed spin. And so I just kind of laid back on my back on my sleeping bag, which was a crappy little sleeping bag I had, and that's what I slept in. Was a was an old worn out sleeping bag. And it was, and so I was laying back. I go into this dream though where I'm drowning. Like I remember specifically what I saw in my mind's eye was black and white. I was out in the stormy ocean, just right off the rocks, right up the like right next to these rocks on the coast. So I was like, and I was drowning in this dream, and I heard this horrible gurgling sound, this horrible sound, this gurgling sound, and my eyes open up, and there's this fountain of purple puke coming out of my mouth, all over me, and all over the sleeping bag. And the dream was I was drowning, and I was. And this was like about 18 months after John Bonham actually drowned in his puke and died. So so people do that, and I was doing that that night. So that's just like one thing that happened to me. Another time, probably a year later, 1983, I remember. It was June of 1983 because I had like it was like I still remember it was probably like the best drinking month of my drinking career. It's like my last summer of drinking was like the best, my best time drinking. And this, by the way, was after I went to my first two AA meetings too. I may add. So it didn't quite AA didn't ruin my drinking right away, but anyways, we're driving along. I was driving my drinking buddies Nova. I remember he had a green Chevy Nova. I'm driving. He lets me drive, and we'd already started out of town because we used to go out of town to go drink to start off. Harold's Club. The Poor Henry's out in Clinton. We used to go out there, and then maybe we'd stop off at the Turrepines bar, and drink there too, and or start there. I remember one night we're both starting. I remember we're both talking about you get that first initial blast from the alcohol, and you get that bang. I remember he goes like bang, and yeah, so it's like that's where we're at. Well, anyway, we're driving in. I was driving the Nova, and we came up to we missed the off ramp, a 990 out here, Orange Street. So I come down the on ramp, and and here comes a car coming right up, right there. We both swerve around each other. So, y- and our attitude about that, you can imagine we could have easily gotten killed or killed somebody. Drunk driving. So that's kind of the underlying gist. But the thing is how we handle it. It's like, whoa, like that. Yeah, next stop, 10th Street Tavern. It's like, it's like I don't even know how to describe it, but it was like there was no really regard for how we treated ourselves, each other, or the rest of the world. Is the best way to say it. But that's in retrospect. But it's like just the attitude of it just seemed like life. This is the way life is. This is real life. This is real living, and and I can tell you at that time I had virtually no desire to stop drinking. And a third one, I'm going to go back to my initial drink, my very first drink when I was 9 years old. I was, we had my birthday's, my belly button birthday's in November, middle November. So this had been like what, 1970. I remember I think Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali were getting ready to box it out somewhere back then. It was one of those. If any of you are old enough to remember any of that, that's way. And, but yeah, it's like because it's on, yeah, because it's that time period. So, and we lived in a pretty nice house. We actually my folks. The best way to describe my parents and our lifestyle that we had, I call it proletarian prosperity because my father never got a high school diploma until I was like somewhere in grade school. I was the last of three sons. And we had a house, we had an acre of grant of land and some cars. I used to talk about our place as a swimming pool, a two-car garage, and three stock liquor cabinets. And I always talk about it like there was something wrong about all of that. But I look back at it today, and we am getting back to my story here, but I want to say this. I do want to give a little lead into the fact we didn't have it that bad. We actually, I never knew hunger growing up. We had fresh water out of a well. We had land. We had a little piece of land, and my dad and my mom and my dad they worked. My mom was a nurse at the St. Pat's Hospital. My dad was he worked at the Bonner Mill, and he's a lumber supervisor. So he dealt with a lot of basically wheeled and dealed in lumber, and and they're people they knew how to they were willing to work. They had a work ethic. I was raised to have a work ethic growing up, and I got to see the fruition of that. It was actually a good thing. So it wasn't anything like that. I the reason I'm alcoholic had nothing to do with childhood traumas or anything or deprivation or anything like that. But if anything, there we were, proletarian prosperity, our nice house, fresh air outside, all this stuff. Anyway, my mother had whipped up some raspberry cordial out of raspberry juice and vodka, and so anyway, they gave me a glass of this stuff. I remember it was like this amber kind of a glass, amber punch glass that we had, and they filled it up. Well, anyway, I drank that, and how many here remember your very first drink and that feeling of the like, yeah, the big beefy muscular guy with the hammer in his hand hits the gong, and then that's the very first bong in your life, and it's like, and out comes like one person said in here, this isn't my word, this is someone else's. That's out came the red carpet, like welcome home. I remember one of things, statements like that. But that feeling like this is it, this is it. And I drank my little punch glass of raspberry cordial. And then my mom's kind of wags her finger, kind of in her attitude, like, you only get just one, and I'll tell you, my mom and me didn't get along too well up to that point, but we were at war from there on. And, and really, I mean, it's like, Like, I mean, it kind of says it right there. And then, but I gotta say this part too. Like a day or two after that, I remember we're in, we're all in the kitchen, and my mom was, being a nurse, she was able to get glass IV jugs from the time period. They're about like yay by yay, and made out of glass, and they were filled. She had a bunch of these like surplus ones she got from the hospital, and she filled those up with that raspberry cordial. I never forget those sitting in the bottom of the fridge with the drawer you put the veggies. That was pulled out, so we had the place for the raspberry cordial, and I'll never forget just like how I felt standing before those bottles. It's like my soul. I mean, that's it. My soul was just reaching out to it. It's like any cheesy love song you hear from, whatever, whoever, I mean, you know any of those great love songs, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, any of them, Bobby Vinton, whoever, those kind of it was almost schmaltzy, the love I had for alcohol after, and like I say, it was like is an if anything, I think I always have to talk about that when I speak about my alcoholism, because I don't think non-alcoholics ever have that experience. I just don't think they have it, because they don't have the physiology that would respond to alcohol like we do. And so anyway, you get kind of not just, kind of a little bit what I was like, you get kind of an idea, but why, that physiology. Because to me, a big part of me being an alcoholic today is the knowledge that my body, my physiology, my thinking, my body, my soul, my spirit don't react to alcohol once that craving is triggered. Once I put alcohol in myself. So that's why I wanted to just mention that, because that really, I don't think anything in my talking in the years I've been here has ever really said it quite like that. And that's right out of my experience. And now I will say I didn't start stealing alcohol. See, I was 9 years old then. I didn't really start, I mean, we had like some hard cider one time, and I got into that a little bit, but no one ever noticed. And I loved it. It was really good stuff. And then, but I just wanted like, it's like I could feel it after a cup, like two or three of them, but I didn't like really pursue it till I was 13. And by then, we started having a lot of booze in the house, and which was great. I will not complain about that. And I know I liked 7 Up, gin and 7 Up. I had the thing about J.W. Dant gin and 7 Up. It was like, if you get it in just the right ratio, it's like you don't want too much gin, just enough, and it was like for years after, 7 Up never tasted right without some gin in it. It's just, you got to have that. And and so I was 13, like I will give you this story too, from when I was 14. That's like, yeah, I was getting into my folks' stash. And like I say, I remember we had like a Canadian, a Texas Fifth of Canadian Club in the closet, that we come through the door, and right there was this Texas Fifth of Canadian Club. And it was just like, it's like perfect, And I remember my dad filling it back up with half-gallon jugs of Canadian Club. And the nice thing about it is you get a can of Coke, maybe you drink it halfway down. And you just go right in there and squirt that Canadian Club in there, and there you go. It's like, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, being 14, I mean, you know, life was actually pretty good back then. I know socially I was an outcast and all this other stuff, like a lot of us, but I really haven't gotten too much social beyond that, but sitting in the 40 some years since. But at the same time, it's like, you know, but it wasn't, gosh, that number one resource, alcohol. We had plenty of it in the house. And I wanted to say this though. When I was about 14, I remember I started drinking in the afternoon on a Saturday afternoon, and it was drinking while I was mowing the lawn and outside, 14. And then, you know, later on that night, about 2:30, somewhere in there, my folks, they went out on their they went out to a little soiree somewhere, and then they came back, and when they did, I was crawling up the steps trying to get to my bed, and I had thrown up all over the couches downstairs, so they had that in the couches, and I remember for years later, you could smell that puke in the couch, those couches down there. Well, anyway, they come in, and I'm like, I'm just trying to tell them, no, I'm just drunk, but they're like freaking out because they didn't know what happened. And then and we're on their way they throw me in the back of the station wagon we had, and they head into the hospital with me in the back seat behind my mother. And I'll never forget going past East Missoula and hearing my mom up here riding shotgun going, could it be the microwave oven? You know, and it's like I kept on, "Oh, I'm just drunk, mom, I'm just drunk," and they took blood out. Eventually, she got a clue and had blood alcohol count taken, and it was 0.248 or something like that, so, or 84. I don't know. I remember what it was back in 1976, so it's been a while. Um, but it's like, so yeah, so there I was hospitalized being inebriated. So like I'm checking these things off the to-do list to get into here. And so anyway, high school came around, did a lot of drinking in high school. And I tell you, today, to this day, I'm grateful we had plenty of booze in the house because it got me through high school. And I make that, I'm kind of serious. If anything, I think I would have drank harder. But I, there's always something about me that said, well, if you drink too hard, you might be alcoholic, and that means you have to stop. And it's like, well, I better slow down, I better control myself, you know, like all these things, all these things that go in my head about it. Well, anyway, back in the day, they moved the drinking age first from 19 years old, I remember, down to 18, and then they moved it back to 19 when I was about 17. But yeah, so it's kind of like they got ahead. But that was a time where I'll never forget being down at the Stocks one night with a can of hams in my hand. Well, they didn't serve hams at the Stocks. And there's my bus driver from high school there. He's having a beer too with somebody. And it's like, and it's like, it just felt like this is the way life is. This is life. This is living. I have arrived. And because back then, if you knew how to handle yourself, you could drink underage in a bar. There was no, I mean, you just could do it like this is like, it was a different time and different, like drunk driving. The reason why so many people die in the roads from drunk drivers is that it wasn't till about that time we started to have like the DARE program and stuff like that. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving. MAD was the one I was thinking of. But, you know, it just, you could do that if you knew how to handle yourself, and eventually I hit 19, so I was legal age, and then I could start drinking in the bars, and I didn't have to steal from my folks anymore, and or whatever, and and it became just a natural part of my life was to drink in the bar, drink, I mean, just to have alcohol in my system. I would try going out. I would occasionally, take a break from it, and I could do, I don't know. I tell you this though, I took a break when I was 19. And I have to tell you this because this is a big part of why I know I'm alcoholic today. Because this is where I first started working the first step. Okay, summer of 1981. I'm 19 years old. I have a job at the mill as a security guard. I'm keeping the place from burning down. Love my job actually, and things are going good. But I decided to take a couple of months off of drinking to work to build my wills, to exercise my will. Way of you know of strengthening my character. Building my character, whatever. Within about 2 weeks, I was going nuts, and I put two and two together and said, "Well, no, I feel normal, but now without alcohol, I don't. I wonder if I'm alcoholic." And I started asking people, about it. And like mostly it was like, oh, no, 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 you couldn't be alcoholic. You couldn't be alcoholic. There's one guy though that did first. He did 12 step me, and he actually talked a little bit about about the book and about his experience here. And I remember he was the one that really started to notice that. And when I got sober, him and me started getting along pretty well, And but anyway, I almost lost my job at about 1 month without a drink, and I associated today with just I don't know about anyone else, but I'm just plain crazy without a drink after about 30 days, and I'm pretty sure some of you are like that too, because and I know I have been. I could put it that way, and but I did make my point, my goal, which was my birthday, that November, and I did have one shot of wild turkey that night, and then so I was able to do that, and but after that, my drinking really picked up, and then through 1982, I did a lot of drinking. I was, there was one theme that started to really come up in my mind at the time was suicide, and then I quit once again for 2 months, for my till my birthday. And that lasted 28 days, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So I went down to the bar and said, "I'm having my birthday early this year." And they gave me a free shot of wild turkey to get me going. And then I was trying to pour. I figured there was something about how I was drinking my beer and my bourbon, and the bartender said, "Well, that's how the sissies do it," or something like that. And it's like, yeah, well, whatever. It's like whatever. But yeah. But anyway, I got home and I had like a bottle of wild turkey in one hand and a quart bottle of Coors in the other at my home, like about an hour or so after all that. And I was pouring myself a Boilermaker at home, and something about that whole scene just, I don't know, something about it just hit me. Just looking at it, it's like something about it just did not set well with me. And I ended up pouring it all down the drain. And the next afternoon, I called Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time. And that night, I went to my first AA meeting. So here we're getting into recovery. We're getting into what happened. And see, what I was like, what happened? What I'm like now, yeah, this is what happened. I went to my first AA meeting over on the other side of town. It's the Lutheran church. Two of the people who are in the meeting I still see in meetings today. Two of them I never saw after that. And I think I might still have the original meeting schedule. Back then, they're real small. They're not like they're a lot bigger now. And one thing I noticed sitting in there, so the four of them shared. I remember I introduced myself. Well, I'm such and such, and I think I've been alcoholic for some time. But just the idea of actually coming out and saying I'm alcoholic is like, do I really want to commit to this? I mean, I was glad to make that first that step of going to an AA meeting and trying this, but I wanted to drink too, and the next week there's only like one of the people there and me, and we ended up going to the Al-Anon Club, and I ended up buying a big book, and I got this book. I saw the book Living Sober, and it's that title right there, Living Sober. I tuned right into that because I mean, it's like it was drawing me. Best way to say it. I got to get that because there's that title, Living Sober. I mean, I was like, that just, it said something to me that subconsciously, it's like, I need that. It's like this, because that's what I don't know how to do. I mean, I'm great. Let's face it, my opinion, I'm a damn fine drinker here. I'm on my way to the top of the rock out there at Harold's Club in downtown Swelltown as the king, king, king town drunk out there, and I'm gonna be. I mean, I just knew that I was gonna be the town drunk. It's almost like yeah, game of bar stools. That's what we were playing out there. And I was the mother of dragons, Khaleesi, Daenerys, Targaryen, of of drinking, and so it's like, yeah, and so anyway, I got that book, Living Sober book, and well, the next week I decided I'm going to go get another bottle of Coors beer. but I'm not going to close the door on Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want to say that because any of us that's pretty new and fresh to this, I'd like to say that right there. It really helped me that I never closed the door to this. Because I know every one of us in here has been at least to one AA meeting because we're in one right now. So, I hope that no matter where you're at with your drinking or sobriety or whatever, I hope you never close the door to those. And I'd made up my mind never to close the door to this. And, a year and a DUI later, I ended up back and went to my third meeting at the Missoula group, which is the Knights of Columbus Hall. And uh, like the first 2 weeks, I started coming, I don't know, like I went to three meetings, three meetings a week for 2 weeks. And then I was going every day. And, uh, and, at that time, winter came into Montana when we had like honest to God winters, and that the week before Christmas, in the mill that I worked at, all the thermometers outside shattered. That all the mercury ones shattered. It got that cold. It was well below 40, below zero. And at that point, it doesn't matter whether it's Celsius or Fahrenheit because it's all averages out right about there anyway. And I was working out in that, so it gives you, and it stayed like that for weeks, and that's kind of how I got sober. Well, anyway, uh, what had happened was I mentioned the DUI. I was my driver's license was in Helena. They did allow me to drive. The Honorable Wally Clark let me drive my car to work, and that's about it. And but so I was able to do that. But a lot of times I'd walk to the meeting. I lived over South 6 West over, if you know where the tracks are out in that part of town where the tracks meet South 6 West. That's about where I lived. Well, I'd walk from there down to the Knights of Columbus Hall, which is about 2 blocks from the Methodist church where the noon group meets now. And, I clocked it in my thing back then, it was 1.8 miles. And so I'd walk that in that kind of temperature to get to an AA meeting. And, things I heard here was like people would talk about going to any lengths to stay sober, just like they go to any lengths to drink. And so I started figuring, well, this is just, this is where I'm really building my characters, walking in, 30 below zero weather, to get to an AA meeting. And I noticed like one thing I noticed about coming to AA was the people back then. I don't know if I've asked about people since then who knew me back at that time, and what I've got was from two specific people. Was one said crazy as a bed bug about me, and another one said, yeah, you're a little bit unhinged when you came in, but you fit right in with everyone else because like we have a friend, one of my sponsors from back in that time. He's still comes to the noon group. I still see him around town. We talk about those times. Like, I mean, people were nuts back then. I'd say this, it's like my first couple of weeks I was there. I met one guy and not too long after that, he committed suicide. And then there was another guy who I was going to ask be my sponsor. That guy, like a couple of weeks, about a couple months after I was going to ask him at a speakers meeting, but he didn't show up till like at the end. But anyway, a couple of months later, he blew his head off or something like that. He shot himself on his mother's bed in her home with a deer rifle. So there's 2 suicides. And so it gives you kind of the environment that was going on here at the time. It was, but I'm going to tell you something. I kept coming and I took a lot of initiative. I'd take at the mills I worked at, I would take my big book, especially the one at the Missoula mill. Right now it's Ogren Park and that whole development now. Well, back then it was a mill. It was the Missoula mill, and it was like this old, rustic old mill that was built about turn of the century or whatever. But it was a beautiful building in its own right, though. It was fun to walk around that building at night because it was just so old and rustic, and it was just I don't know. I really liked it. And, uh, and on my break, I'd bring my big book and I'd study it and I'd underline things. And I took the initiative and I got to mention that I took a lot of initiative and I started, when I could get into service work, I did. I started opening the Missoula group for a while. And I'll never forget, I'm not going to go off on this too much, but I'll never forget. The day was the 4th of April, 1984, Wednesday. And at the noon meeting, I came out and admitted I drank the night before. And the thing is in literature, that's that point in literature opens up George Orwell's novel 1984 because it opens up at 1 p.m. in the afternoon on the 4th of April. And that's where I was out. Well, anyway, I had two meetings to open that day. And I opened both of them with a hangover. So I did. I opened. Yeah, I opened two AA meeting. I did AA service with a hangover, so you don't have to. But but if you want to, it's well. At least because today I'll say this. At least I showed up, and I give myself credit for that. It's like and they make kind of cute stories too. It's cute stories for us in here, but I will say this though. I made it almost 5 months without a drink. And it wasn't just white knuckling it. I was being active in AA. And that in itself left such an impression on me. But I still did not want to give up the drinking yet. And I knew that. And as those next couple of weeks went along, that kept coming up where it talks about the psychopath. We all know about the psychopaths, but never a decision. And that kept on going through my mind. And finally, in June of that year, 1984, after a little bit of slipping and sliding here, but also going to a lot of AA meetings and, and even applying myself in service again and all this stuff, and, even if I had like a real bona fide sponsor too. I mean, as far as how the literature talks about sponsorship. And he's also the guy I smoked weed with the last time. And, but, that's an outside issue. So, and, but anyway, so June and this, I gotta tell you, this is what happens. Yeah. One night I did a little drinking, not a lot, but I'll never forget. All I wanted to do was kill myself. And like all I really wanted to do is and I could not drive my car into a concrete pylon. I mean, I wanted to. And I was trying to get the capacity to do that. And the thing that went through my mind was, this is as good as it's going to get. Like my drinking's not going to get any better than this, like me being suicidal. It's not going to get any better than this. And so the next night, I still had a hangover and showed up at the men's meeting at the club that used to be at 725 West Elder. And after the men's meeting, we were talking about the men's meeting, we were talking about, well, what if it still worked for you? Like, what if it still worked for you? Like that was the topic. And so it's like afterwards, one of the people in the club, somebody knew I did not get along with at all, offended me. I got angry and I stormed out and headed right out to Harold's Club. And when I got there, I stopped on the way at the Missoula group for about 5 minutes and I said, heck with it. And I was off to the races going to Harold's Club. And I got to Harold's Club. A guy I knew there bought me 2 shots of bourbon and I was on my way. After like old home, it felt like old home night for the first hour that I was there drinking. And it just felt good being back on a bar stool with a beer in my hand. And just, I have to admit that, it's like, I'm not going to sit there, make drink. I'm going to be honest about my drinking. I loved it, but I remember sitting there, like the guy who was sitting right next to, I considered him like the reigning town drunk. Like he wore that crown and I gave him honor. And he told me, he's like, I know this stuff isn't good for me, but it's like, I just don't want to stop, and that made sense to me. And so I rolled over on my bar stool and I'm sitting there with my beer in my hand. And I started thinking about the guy that offended me, that he'd be waking up sober the next day and I wouldn't be. I'd be hungover. And then it's like I could kind of sense something that, yeah, I had arrived, and there it was. Bar stool and a divey bar in the middle of nowhere in Montana. And it wasn't going to be this big melodramatic thing at all. It was just going to be me drinking at a bar and drinking my life away. And I'll never forget turning back around and looking at all the bottles behind the bar. They used to have all this glow about them. They used to shimmer. I'd see all the bourbon bottles, all the bars bottles behind the bar. They would just shimmer. At that point, they didn't shimmer one bit. They just looked like bottles of booze in a bar, and not a high end bar either, I may add. And that night, the end, that last night, the end of that night, I had a like this. I picked up another quarter of Coors on the way home. You know, it was my last drink, and was when I that last little slurp. Yeah, that's a drink for me. Is a quart bottle of beer. That's a beer. It's a quart. You know. So, but anyway, I had that last little bit in my beer schooner at home, and I'll never forget. Yeah, I was feeling like, yeah, this could be the last time you ever drink, because that could be the last drink you ever take if you want. And just how that was a good idea. This is like that. I'll go for that. It's like I don't even know how to say it now, but it's like that felt so good. That idea that I can be separate from alcohol is how I describe it now in my words today. And of course, I drank it, but I felt done. I prayed to my higher power at that time, and the next afternoon I prayed to him, and I actually had no hangover the next day. And that night I went to the Breathing Easy bunch. It used to meet me at 8th and Catland over on, we used to call it the Daily Edition back then. They call it something new and different now, but it's on the other side of Russell. Anyway, they asked me to chair the meeting, so I did. So chaired the meeting, read the part in the big book, starts now about sex. And then we all cheered, and we had one of the best sex meetings in the AA meeting that I ever heard us talk about, you know. So, and it was like, we're like, I'll never forget that feeling. Like, you know, it's like, and like 25 years later, I got thinking about that. I was like, I had less than 24 hours when I chaired that meeting. So I was like, wow. Anyway, so that was the beginning of my sobriety, or beginning of my recovery, I should say. I mean, I really could talk about like the first 2 years, because what I have to say, if I probably don't have much time left, but I do got to say something about my first 2 years of sobriety, because I got very active in recovery in all of the little AA things. I had the Living Sober book, and I was following that. But I got to say this, that I, the first 6 months went pretty well. And the big 6 months, that's the big birthday, big anniversary I've ever had in sobriety is 6 months. You know, last year's was 39 years. That's great. I'm good with that. But I'll tell you, I think it's more of an accomplishment to get 6 months without a drink than it is to get 39 years. And but I'm going to tell you right now, I think 2 years for me was like I didn't know 2 years could be even more so, because 18 months, I hit my bottom, like a whole different bottom. I don't really want to take too much time to talk about it, but I will say this, that I, you know, my first 6 months went okay. That 6 months was great. But then right for the next year, it was a roller coaster ride down to bam, rock bottom. And the big thing is I stayed sober through it. You know, I used what we had, and I stayed sober through it. And I got to say that. Because I'm going to tell you, I know other people who have a real struggle the first couple of years in here, and you know, and it was, yeah, I wanted to be sober though, and that's the bottom line. I really wanted to have this. I was willing to work for it, and to, you know, kind of running. I want to talk about what it's like now, because, but I have to talk about this part too. You know, the of early recovery, the first couple of, because first couple of years, because it really left the, you know, I really have a lot of like some really happy memories of that time period, because everything was so new. I started college back then, and it was kind of like the saying that people had back in the 80s, you know, and AA, like get sober and go to college, go to school. That's kind of what we did, you know. And I remember I took an art class and I took Julie Teoden's Intro to Acting. I think it was 120. The art class was 123. This was like, I can't, this was like a 100 class, but I remember, you know, the art class, I walked out after two weeks and of course, you know, kind of know how that went, but, and then the acting class, I got an A and absolutely aced the final thing that we had. And I'll never forget what it was. I took the last paragraph in George Orwell's 1984 and performed it on stage in front of everyone. I was like, got an A right there, an A in the whole class because it was a natural for me. And then I got Adele Hanson's advanced intro to acting. And then later on the next year, I got into acting itself. And that's what I did in college first couple of years was performing arts. And you know, it's like you're never going to make a penny out of it. To be, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, really, you know, anybody in the arts. I do have a novel that's written and it's been published and it's out in the market right now. So and I haven't made any money on that either. So it's like, it's, so that's why, you know, it's why I swamp a bar now to pay the rent and I'm making pretty good money doing that. And it's actually, I like my job as a bar swamper because, and they like me because I do a great job. And you know, I also know too, is I can go to a bar. I just came from the bar earlier tonight. I worked this morning and just left at 9, locked the door. It was about 9, something like that. You know, rattled the door. It's all the doors secure. Place looks good. It's got it all clean. You know, somebody puked last night outside, so, but I'll take care of that tonight when I get there. So probably in the morning, tomorrow morning, but you know, so you know, it's yeah. And it's like I know too that I mean, I feel this today. I mean, after all these years of being here, it's like I feel like they're safe with me in there because it's like I have nothing against other people having a few drinks. Most of those people who go to that bar, I think, they're not like us. They could go there, have a couple of drinks, and they're okay. You know, they can have a good time. You know, and that's what it's there for. And I'm glad, and I think that's a good thing. It's just I can go there clean, make decent money, and pay the rent, and feel good about it, and enjoy my job. I like cleaning. I like doing this. I like doing it and getting paid for it. You know, sometimes, you know, I do a great job when I clean my apartment, but it's usually like 3 times a year or so. So, but that's me. But you know, I just want to say that because that's what it's like, what I'm like, or what I'm like, and it's like now. So it's um, you know, just you know, like in between then, you know, there's decades of time. One thing I really, yeah, I still got a few minutes. I do want to talk about this. What I've noticed is like I am not that far from my next anniversary, my sober anniversary. And granted, I don't want, you know, no fronts or anything like that. You know, we just have today. But I do know that a lot of us do go through a lot of like we feel it when we're approaching an anniversary. And I do think there's a relationship with like how our bodies respond to going without alcohol. Like like the 30-day thing, you know, it's like now I'd just be nuts without a drink up to or maybe around 30 days. I had a drinking buddy with the Chevy Nova. I remember he could go like 90 days without a drink and then he'd have to drink. And it's like you get this little thing where this is the big barrier. It's like if you could get over that. It's like when I got almost 5 months, my first attempt at really doing AA, it's like that set the real barrier that if I can get to 6 months, then I can get 6 decades. And well, I got a lot. Yeah, I'm not going to even talk 6 decades now, but I should definitely talk 3 decades plus. And you know, it's like these are things that you know because it, one thing when I was here like this, it was the second year I was here. I'd just gotten a year. Somebody brought up a packet of things he ran off on, you know, the Xerox, as we would say back in the day, you know, copied off about the La Hacienda studies. And basically, the La Hacienda studies were these autopsies done on drunk people found, and think it was Albuquerque or something like that, down in New Mexico or something like that. But what they found in the brains was what they've come to call tetrahydroisoquinoline, THIQ, and it's a substance that's in the brain of alcoholics that isn't in normal people's brains. And the reason, if I like talking about the physical aspect, is I believe I have that in my brain matter. And then you probably got enough evidence before this little court of jesters here that probably agree. And I can say what I wanted to talk about though is Valley anniversaries. Is I ain't gonna get too graphic. I was in one time when I threw out the word coconut oil, and all of a sudden some people got kind of disturbed. But I said, "Oh no, no, it's not like that." It's like, but it felt like it because I feel like my anniversary is like the anniversary with the woman I love, where we just keep falling in love with each other through the years. That's the best way to describe it. That's how I really feel about, that's how I feel about sobriety. I didn't say this too much when I was talking about my drinking. I did talk about really liking it, not wanting to stop. But I know it is kind of an analogy people use is the love affair with alcohol, the romance with it, alcohol, a love affair. That's a book. Somebody else wrote that book. And just that title says it all, it's like, and I won't get too graphic or anything. I remember one time though, we're up to the Alano Club back in the day, some years back when it was still 725 West Alder. And I got talking about that almost like the pleasure of the physical sensation of drinking, and people thought I was having sex with alcohol, and they're all laughing at it. And I know what they're saying because I know that that's exactly, I get that. But with sobriety, it really feels like, I mean, I don't want to get, I want to watch how I say things in here in AA because I definitely have a way of putting things. But I will say this with sobriety, it's lovemaking. It's all lovemaking, and it feels like that. It feels like real, honest to God, mutually shared love between the two of us. I feel like if sobriety had a personality, that personality would value me as much as I value that personality. It's a good way to say it. Because I've gotten so much more out of being sober than I put into it. And I put some things into it. I mean, probably the big sacrifices I gave up drinking. I was willing to sacrifice that. I was willing to let go of the hope that I could drink again. And I mean, I have to say it that way because that's what I was hanging on to when I got in here. I did not want to give up that hope when I got here, but when I let go of that and it went out the window, then I started to get this. And then I got the hope of being sober no matter what. And but what's happened is since then is I just value my sobriety. I value what I have here. I love this. Like my soul's just like, so much affection. It's like big, big heart feelings for it. It's like it is, it feels like that. It's just like, it's like, you know, sobriety could be my human and I'm its dog, and we're just like, you know, I'm just like to my sobriety, it's just it feels like that. It feels that kind of that undying, that unconditional love for it. And, um, so that's what I'm like today. Other things I'm like I've have a job. I've worked throughout my sobriety. I've learned I've had to. I have had experiences being homeless in sobriety. I have been unemployed. I've had hard times finding work sometimes, and all the things we go through in life. Basically, I've done life. The only thing I haven't done in sobriety is I never got married, and today I've learned to be content being alone, and I'm actually quite content with it. It works pretty well for me. I mean, it's some things I miss out on that I'm not going to talk about, but at the same time, you know, I've really learned I don't know if I've pursued happiness in my life in my sobriety, and I don't like being unhappy, but I found contentment seems to really work the best for me is be content and to work with what I have today. And I like the idea of focusing on the moment I'm really learning it, but just take it for today, like really how to balance that out with being able to look forward, to plan things out. And just, we're about at the end here, so I'll just put a little plug in for the Western Area Conference of Young People in AA. I want to say too, I also got involved in the YPA experience of that Alcoholics Anonymous house. And that's young people in AA get together and have a great time doing things. And we have a new YPA in town now, and I was involved with ZooeyPA, and then we put on the Wacky Paw 24, the Western Area Conference, Young People in AA back 2022. And I got this shirt down in Oakland. I brought in at Wacky Paw 25. That's right. And I'm on the advisory council, and we're putting together, there's going to be one in Denver coming in first week in January. So other than that, that's kind of where I'm at in service right now. I'm also the GSR of we used to always know it as the POV. We still do, even though we haven't been in the POV since COVID experience started. But I am our GSR, be that for the end till the end of the year. So that's where I'm at in service, and happy to get up here and share my experience. I hope you got something out of it. I'm sure you had to have, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad, I like talking. So I got a big mouth and I'm unashamed of it.